Welcome to another episode of the Average Pastor podcast. I'm Mark, and with my friends, Jeff and Jake, and we're back here in the fire porch.
We are. It's a beautiful day.
It is.
Yeah.
Sun shining in. It's a great day.
It is. You don't always get this in the middle of Iowa winter, so take them.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah, I've got happy news. Since last time I found this water bottle, I found it in Lost and Found, but then I lost it.
Did you find it again?
And then I found it in Lost and Found again. So, but the only thing it was in the errant Lost and Found in my house. There's like a drawer, and I pulled it out this morning. I'm like, where was this whole time?
Anyway, that's hilarious.
What was lost has been found. So anyway,
rejoice. Call your friends and
that's
rejoice.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
there you
right.
go.
Let's have a party.
What we're doing. Nalgene bottle was found. So I want to just catch up a little bit. How you guys doing? You guys, how's your week going?
Really well for me. Yeah, I was able to actually, Ecclesiastes says better to go to the house of mourning than a house of feasting. For such our end will be, or something like that. Like, it allows us to do some thoughtful consideration. Anyway, just a dear friend. But from years back, we lived up in northern Iowa after seminary for just a short time, just a couple of years. But this particular family was like a backbone for us during some of the most difficult time of our lives. Our kids kind of grew up together. We'd go on vacation together. He started sending me pictures of all of our kids up at Lake Cabacona in northern Minnesota and all that. Well, anyway, Lana, my friend Tim's wife, passed away with ALS. And so went to her funeral and was able to spend time with Tim and then their kids, now grown, obviously. And it was good. And then went up and saw my mom because she lives not so far from that. So 98 years old and still doing great. So I don't know, just one of those quick, one overnight, but saw some important people. You know what I mean? Like put everything else aside. And
so that was in your time up in Allison?
Yeah.
After seminary?
Yeah.
How long were you there?
So I think we were there just over 2 years. It seemed like 2 decades. It was. I mean, I went from Los Angeles and riding high. I mean, just feeling like, man, this big puff of wind in the sails, just forward thinking, and hit Butler County, Iowa, and just felt like nothing was going my way. It was nothing but difficulty and soul searching, and just everything kind of ground to a halt. So, but in the midst of that, all the things that God drew out of my character and sanctified me in a ton of ways, but even some of the beautiful friendships that came into our lives and those that have carried us through. I mean, to this day, some of those friends that God brought into our life for such a time as this, were pivotal, right, for us. And So how was it? I mean, just emotionally going, did it take you back to that period of your life? A little bit, but you know what? The sting of the bad stuff, it truly is gone. God's brought just a lot of healing, So no PTSD or anything like that going back up there. In fact, if anything, just seeing, especially Tim and his kids. In fact, even as the family, is making the processional up this Lutheran church center aisle thing, their son, his name's Elliot, looked over, saw me, grabbed my arm, and just stopped the whole procession to say, "Thank you for coming here. It means so much," and just so way more happy.
Yeah,
not so much regrets or thoughts of what didn't go so well up in that neck of the woods, but more just, man, this family, I want to be here for them. And then also, I mean, that whole idea from Ecclesiastes, I mean, those are our peers. And I'm looking at Lana in this casket, and the last time we saw Lana, she was full of life. And you know what I mean? That's so even as I was sitting there and then I was looking over, I could get emotional in this, but I'm seeing, so Elliot, his son, and Tim, the dad, throughout the whole funeral, they kept reaching over and like putting their arm around each other and kind of holding each other steady. And so then I started imagining, whoa, what if that was Teresa up there? Who would I be flanked by of my children that we'd be kind of holding each other in those moments. You know what I mean? Like in a good and healthy way, like, oh, thank you, God, that I know my children to be there for each other and for me, vice versa if it were Teresa and I were the one in the casket. You know. So anyway, it's kind of just healthy. You know what I mean? To enter into those spaces and what it does for your soul. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Sorry to bring that's kind of a negative way to start.
Heavy
this.
jump. That's
it was
good
a heavy
notes.
one, man.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, but that was my week. You asked about my week. That was my week so
How's
far.
your week, Mark?
Good. I'm doing some sermon prep on Luke 5, the story calling of Levi. It's where Jesus says it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And yeah, I'm just thinking about how sometimes we can look at the Pharisees as the bad guys asking the questions like, how could they? Like we see the, Levi, Matthew, it was Matthew, one of his disciples, he calls him out of his tax booth. And it's probably a life that's worse than being a fraudster. You think of the worst fraudsters in American history, people that have robbed people of millions and billions of dollars. But these guys were,
National traders.
National traders and using extortion, threatening people with, they're collecting taxes. So anyway, just thinking about that story, but the question they ask is kind of a logical question. How could you be hanging out with these guys? What if you're really like, what are you doing hanging out with them? So I'm just in the middle of that, thinking through that and preparing for Sunday. What are you preaching this Sunday?
Yeah.
What are you preaching on?
We're starting chapter 8 of 2 Corinthians. So we got like chapters 8 and 9 will be pretty much like 6 weeks of money talk. So it's gonna be glorious.
Oh wow.
Yeah. We got the first 7 verses of chapter 8.
What's your big idea? What's kind of the big idea of that passage? I don't remember what the first part of chapter 8.
Well, I got way too many notes than I should have for someone that already struggles with time. So I'm like, what do you cut? And you guys have all experienced that where it's like, it's just 7 verses, but then you start to dig and there's just much good stuff in there. So we're going to try to get a definition of Christian giving and maybe confront some misunderstandings or wrong conclusions about giving. I mean, he uses the Macedonians as an example, and we can take a really like private, your giving's your thing. And here's Paul, like, I want you to know how these people gave. Oh, wow. And I'm challenging you in your giving. And it's interesting because the Macedonians were poor. The Corinthians were probably more rich. And it's like, rich people, let me tell you how poor people give in this scenario. And using, I mean, can you imagine? And I'm tempted to do this. Like, Cedar Rapids, do you know what Iowa City is giving to them?
Those poor folk down in Iowa City.
The problem is you guys are the Macedonians.
Yeah. Well, it seems like I mean, he's using. Well, he does the same thing to the Macedonians though, because he tells them about the Corinthians are eager to give. So it's like Paul's using other people's giving as a way to spur up other giving.
Because he also, uses the Philippians and thanks the Philippians in his letter to the Philippians. And that was, as is just this small little town. It was an outpost for the military and all that. Yeah. But certainly not the entrepreneurs of the Roman Empire living in Philippi. You know what I mean? But I do like how he leans into those examples and says, man, look at these guys,
Yeah, he calls, the imperative in those verses is to excel in this act of grace and just connecting giving as an act of grace and what's the connection there. So there's a lot. I gotta cut something. I don't know what it's going to be, but
I'm eager to listen to it.
It's probably going to be a song. I'm going to tell him, cut a song.
Yeah.
That's always the song. That's what always has to go.
You've heard that before, James.
Okay.
Did we just talk about that this week? I think this week we just had the conversation.
I went overtime and we were trying to figure out
What's got to go?
Man,
Something's
how do we get our services
know,
shorter? I
shorter,
just can't think of how to.
Can we do this?
I mean, we'll just do one song.
Cut the song. I was trying to figure out
The
how
poor
to.
Macedonians, they have so little anyway, Mark, and you're making them do all the giving.
It's all me. That last week they were like, man, we got out on time, maybe even a little early. I'm like, well, Jeff was preaching. He knows how to keep a timer. Jake, there's no way you could. Could Jake come down and preach? Have you ever preached a 30-minute sermon in your entire life?
Yeah, but it's rare.
Yeah, it's
You could get there.
I would honor the time. I'd probably just stop.
Right. Right.
Just it's in there, guys. Just finish it. You'll see it. Read it.
That was actually not uncommon when I was out in LA at Grace Church, where John MacArthur is. I mean, he's quite a homiletics guy, right?
Yeah.
He packages very tightly and well. But there were definitely times, especially on Sunday nights, where he'd be like, well, look at the time. Boom. And that was it.
What I'm envious of in those situations, you would know more than I, but I think when you're preaching like verse by verse through a book and you're not having the same plurality in the pulpit,
Right.
it's like, I'll pick up where I left off.
Yes.
And it's like, that would be nice.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Well, it is kind of, you get to this stage in the sermon prep, Jake, where I'm sure you're looking at your notes and it's like trying to figure out which limb you want to cut off,
Yeah.
like
Right.
which finger
Yeah.
needs to go,
I know.
Yeah.
right?
That's
You need all of it.
Right. And every week you should have good stuff on the cutting room floor,
Absolutely.
but it's hard.
By the way, as long as you're in the spotlight, and also literally the sun's coming in, it's like the Shekinah glory shining down on you. But just this morning, I was talking to a couple guys. One of them is leading a couple other dudes through God is the Prize.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he was talking about how huge it was and the impact it was having. I said, no, unpack that. Like, tell me, because I know a couple of guys. And anyway, just be encouraged that that resource is really
sweet.
It's
long
bearing
sermons,
fruit.
short books. That's where I live.
Also, speaking of your book, we got another comment on the podcast. There's a guy saying, hey, Jake's book needs to be published. I'm from Biloxi, Mississippi, and I need a book like that. I think he's talking about the one you read an excerpt from on the last episode, the eldership one.
Yeah.
So when's it coming out?
Yeah, when is that coming out, Jake?
I've struggled because does it have a wide audience or is it just for church leaders?
Well, apparently down in Mississippi,
Down
there's
in
a
Mississippi.
We got a buyer in
All
Mississippi.
right.
Yeah, I think you should. That's one of the things I love on our writing retreats is I look forward just to sitting around on a back deck or wherever and just doing the readings
That's a blast.
hearing what you guys are thinking about.
I am moving the ball down the field. I haven't told you guys this on the kids' book, though.
Oh, good.
You connected me with an illustrator and trying to figure out pricing, what I can do. But made some changes, added a chapter, tried to do some. I'm excited about it. I'm really energized by the kids' book right now. I want to see it through the finish.
Do you know the
That's
title?
so great.
What's the title going to be?
We're workshopping, but I think it's The Unusual and Adventurous Raising of Charlie Finley.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I kind of like that longer title, kind of stacked.
Whimsical, yeah.
Yeah, whimsical. That's a good word for it.
That's an incredible book. I can't wait. I sat on the back porch and I read the whole thing to a couple of my kids and they loved it.
Yeah,
It captured them the whole time.
I'm excited for you to see the changes. There's some,
Really?
Yeah.
You added a chapter too.
Yeah. Added a
nice.
chapter and tried to bring some synergy through the whole thing.
Wow.
Man, and we both remember the first time your early
I
stages.
wouldn't have finished it if you guys were.
You didn't even.
We were hanging out. Like,
Remember
this
we
is
were
for
on the
children?
walk.
Yes,
we were on
this
the walk and we're like, so what else? You got any other things you're working on? Not
this
really.
little-
Oh, yeah. Well, there is a children's book I wrote and like, well, let's read it tonight.
I mean, we're like wide-eyed.
You guys are a
What?
good audience. You're a good audience.
You're a good writer. How about that?
So we were talking about, you're working on Gospel 201 with your editor and or going through the editing process and
Yeah.
you're like, is that a lot of work? Does it feel like you're collaborating with someone on what you're writing? And how's that?
So I'm going to trust my audience on this one and let you peek behind the veil. it has been up to this point, it's not like I'm this big author, but the first couple of times that I've gone through a publishing house and an editor, it was really life-giving. And I felt like this time around, not to throw shade on this particular editor, but it, from the beginning, just felt like it was just a lot of corrective, which is important. It's grammar things, and then there's repetition of an idea, like all legitimate, right? That's what their job is to just clean that up. But the reason I called the publisher today is I just said, man, I guess I just need you to know, I'm 62. I don't need somebody to pat my hand or flatter me. I'm pretty confident in who I am in Christ or whatever, but I just need a word like, this is generally the book that you were hoping for. This is, before you start like dicing through you just see this in the margins, and you're like, it's just a little, you need to know. And even as a teacher, right? Like I want people to know, well done here, and you're in the right direction. Yeah. But it's also my job as a teacher to correct wrong thinking, to correct wrong answers. So anyway, that has made it a little bit less life-giving. But the publisher, the head publisher that I was talking to, is an amazing, wonderful woman of God, incredible professionally at what she does, but also by the time we're done with the call, I'm praying over her family. She's praying over my family. So just has a real heart for ministry and the gospel, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it really has been 100% a great experience overall.
It must be difficult working with an editor.
Yeah, I know. Do you remember when he texted us about the struggle of the editing process to two self-published guys? And we were like, it's like complaining about your cleaning lady to two homeless people.
Wait, James, you probably need to pipe in again.
James,
weren't you the editor?
James edited. Hey, James, you gotta jump into this conversation, because you were a lifesaver on. I can't imagine. I always when Jeff talks about the editing process and how great working with editors has been, I'm like, I can't imagine they're better than James.
Right.
Seriously, James did awesome. What was?
Well, I had to have my book edited before it was edited. and the
took a few layers.
The pre-editors who took a lot of time. Here's their comments. I think I know what you're trying to say. So it wasn't even, I know what you're trying. It's like, I'm not certain, but I think I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It was an interesting process. Jake, I remember getting yours that had already been through some rounds and be like, oh yeah, this is easy. Great.
Mark's
was a little more just chicken scratches on a page. But
a little more work.
No, it was all there, but yeah, you're just like, how do you make sense of?
I remember you cut my whole intro. You cut my whole intro, and you're like, "Yeah, that's the intro."
Didn't he write one for you?
He's like, "That's the intro to the Average Pastor book."
Yeah,
and then you took an illustration that I had used in there, and you're like, "This is what your book is about."
That's
and
cool.
Expanded it into what is the intro, and it was more. Yeah,
I remember reading the chapter where you mentioned the turtle on the post, which that's the logo on our podcast. I don't know if we've ever explained what that means on the podcast.
Oh, that's
wow.
But yeah, I remember reading that and thinking that's the point of this book. And then we got into that conversation, and it is helpful to have somebody with completely fresh eyes look at your work and say, okay, I know it makes sense in your head, but to the audience you're communicating to, you need to say that differently.
Well, I even discovered today, this is the first time I knew, there are two different layers of editors. There's content editors and then copy editors. And so the content editors are supposed to keep a little bit more of that 30,000 foot flow of thought, big idea thesis kind of running through. Copy editors are usually tagged for all the detailed things, and even looking up sources. Did you cite the right source? Is it the right page? Whatever, just the minute detail. And so those are two very different worlds. Also, even within editing, people probably do one probably could do either one, but better at one
Sure.
than the other, or whatever, you know? So
James.
it's a whole vocation, editing. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not incidental to this process.
We're going to explain the turtle on the post, but James, can you read the introduction that you and I helped write? Here it is.
You have
Here's
it
my
pulled
phone.
up? Okay. All right, here we go. Here's the introduction. This will explain the turtle. Picture this with me. You're driving down a country road, windows down, watching the rows of corn whiz by. If you live in Iowa like me, this is a pretty easy scene to imagine. You can probably smell it too. Suddenly, something strange catches your eye. You slow down, pull the car onto the shoulder, and get out to investigate. There in front of you, precariously balanced on a narrow fence post, is a turtle. It is perched at about your eye level, flailing its legs in the air, elevated and immobilized. Weird. But let's get weirder. Now imagine you're the turtle. What's going through your head? Maybe it's something like this. I'm on top of the world. I can see everything from up here. If only my friends on the ground could see me now. Okay, let's get even weirder. Now imagine you're one of those turtles' buddies, an average turtle sitting far below, looking up at your friend in his lofty new position. What's going through your head? How did he get up there? I bet that view is amazing. I'm going to get up there someday. Just you wait. All right, you're you again. So what are you thinking as you approach this bizarre scene? Maybe you're chuckling at first. You take a photo to prove you actually saw it. But soon, you can't help feeling a little sad. Out of compassion, you might pluck the turtle from its high place and put it back on the ground where it belongs. But wait, why would you do this when the turtle was living its best life on top of that post? Because we know enough to see the harm that will be done when a gust of wind blows. Or worse, if the wind doesn't blow, leaving it stranded. This high and lofty post turtle doesn't deserve our awe, it deserves our compassion. I don't want to be the post turtle. I don't want to be on top. Or I don't want to be on top. Between the average turtle on the ground and the elevated turtle on the post, we know the turtle on the ground is in a much better position. This is the advantage of average.
That is so good.
So
Can we
good.
change the name of the podcast to Three Turtles That Are Afraid of Heights?
And who have never actually been on the top of a post. If only I could experience it once.
So
Dude,
it's
so
the picture
good.
of, if you see a turtle on a post, you know for a fact that it didn't climb up that post. Somebody put that there. And my dad was telling me about a guy in his men's group, and a very dangerous thing just happened out here on this road.
Did you see
on
it?
this residential road, some car just blew by all these other two cars. Apparently, they're
And then
going
hit
too
the
slow.
speed bump.
Yeah, that's great. Welcome to the fire porch.
Yep.
Well, he was in a men's group, and the guy's like, "Yeah, I feel like a turtle. I'm the turtle on the post." And I looked it up. I was like, "Is that? Did he make that up?" So I was looking at this, and that's just a saying for people that feel like they've been blessed with a position that they didn't earn. Right? They found themselves in their success. They're saying, "I didn't do this. I didn't climb the post. I'm a turtle on a post. I'm a post turtle," and we say that as kind of a good thing. And like that's a great thing. And I took it and I was thinking, wait a minute. Shouldn't you pity that turtle? Because that's a dangerous place to be. Like, and then James out of the park. Like, what if a gust of wind comes? What's going to happen to that? That's a long fall for a turtle. Or worse, what if a gust of wind doesn't come? And that turtle, the air is thin at the top. It's not meant to be up there. And I was thinking of that as to me, the paradox of success. We look at it as we say, I'm a post turtle, or we aspire to be that. All the turtles on the ground looking up and saying, wow, look at that. And everyone's trying to be celebrated, be amazing, be a celebrity, be, be that person that everyone looks at and says, wow, look at them. But we all know the turtles on the ground have the advantage. Yeah. And I do think that and then sort of the whole book goes, and then at the very end, we kind of ask the question about, we are positions of leadership. God does put turtles up and he puts them down on the ground. But there could be a good reason for a turtle being on a post. Like, as
long as that turtle recognizes that someone else placed him there. I mean, because that's kind of the thesis, right? I mean, is all of a sudden this turtle finds himself up there, but imagines that it was of his own will or his own accomplishment or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the real danger right there, you know?
Yeah. And then you become Nimrod, the guy who built the Tower of Babel, up there on the post trying to get all the other, you know, it becomes your domain, your dominion over other, and you don't realize you've just been put there to warn people about a storm that's coming.
Right.
Take cover.
Right.
And don't you feel like we have a microphone in front of us? In a way, we are on a post. And how do you interact with success or positions of having power, having authority? Like your role as an elder at Veritas Cedar Rapids, it's not a negative thing. Mm-hmm. You're going to stand up in front of 2,000-3,000 people this weekend and preach 2 Corinthians 8, and that's a stewardship and a gift. It's not a problem, but it is a vulnerable place to be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you, when you think about this kind of metaphor and what's on our podcast, the turtle on the post, how do you interact with that metaphor, Jake? And how do you think about the stewardship of being in an elevated position?
Well, I think stewardship's the key word there. That there's accountability and responsibility. Like Jeff was saying, you didn't put yourself in that position. There's what's the quote in the Fellowship of the Rings where Frodo's like, I wish the ring had never come to me. And Gandalf's like, so does everybody that lives to see such times. But it's not, I don't know, the quote of like, it's what we do with the time we've been given. Well, that was from a very hard negative situation. I think the same is true for a positive situation. It could be like, I didn't want to be on the post, or I didn't want to be in this position. Well, it's like, you don't get to choose. God puts you in this position. It matters what you do with it. And just trying to see it as stewardship.
I thought of 1 Corinthians 4, because this is really the context of it, is the Corinthians wishing they had Apollos or wishing they had Peter, and you know.
So I'm quoting movies, you're quoting scripture. Yeah, that's how it is. That's nice, novel. Jake. Or we could go to the Bible. Yeah.
It's exactly why I'm doing it, to one up you. No, 1 Corinthians 4, where Paul says to the Corinthians, though, who are clamoring about which turtle on a post they would rather be honoring, you know. And he says, a person should think of us in this way, as servants of Christ and managers of the mysteries of God, or some of the translations have stewards of the mysteries of God. Like you're just taking care of somebody else's stuff. And then he says, in this regard, it is required that managers be found faithful. I mean, I just love that idea, 1 Corinthians 4, 1 and 2, of if we can keep that in the forefront of our minds, so that whether we are a planter, a waterer, a harvester, whatever role we have in this great, you know, field of harvest that God owns, we're managers, we're stewards. And what I don't want is notoriety or my name or a post or whatever. It's to be counted faithful, that I was faithful to what God gave me, you know. But I mean, it's an elusive thing, right? It's the kind of thing that we have to constantly recalibrate toward. But man,
it's when this is released is President's Day. February 20th. And I was thinking about one of my favorite presidents is
John Adams.
No, well, John Adams, Garfield. James Garfield
yeah.
because you read the Candace Millard, The Destiny of the Republic. And it was a fascinating book. One of the things that stuck out to me about Garfield, I mean, this is late 1800s, 1880s. He was only president for a couple months. I think he was assassinated, or he was shot a couple months into his presidency. But the way he became president is hilarious because I think he's a congressman from Ohio, and he goes to the Republican convention in Chicago. There's like 15,000 people there, and he forgets to write a speech or somebody was going to give a speech. He had no plans he didn't want to become the nominee. He did not want to become president. But he gets up in front of 15,000 people and gives this almost extemporaneous speech. And it's so captivating. And he asks at the end, what men do we want? Or something like that. He looks at all the people. I was like, what do we want? And someone yells out, we want Garfield. And they all start chanting. He's like, no. He doesn't want, he's like resisting. And they do like this all night. They keep voting, but they keep voting for him. And finally he gives in. And he was the first, I think one of the first guys that became president almost against his will. Yeah. And I love that. Yeah, I love that. He was kind of known as a good man. And I love that idea. It's like he was kind of the turtle put on the post. He was the Hobbit given the ring, and
the fact is, it never went to his head because even when he got shot, it's because his Secretary of State, I think it was somebody from his cabinet, I think the Secretary of State was going to arrive in D.C. on the train, and Garfield goes down to meet him at the station to talk to him. This is post Abraham Lincoln, so they know there are assassins out there. That there should have been some level of security around the President of the United States, but. No, he never thought he was such a big deal that he couldn't go down and meet his buddy at the train station. And that's where this assassin ends up.
But you could argue it wasn't the bullet that killed him.
Right.
It was, if they just would have left the bullet in him, he probably would have healed, survived. What killed him was this surgeon, this doctor was very territorial of him, was so proud that he was the president's doctor, wouldn't let anyone else, and he kept digging around for the bullet.
Horrible.
And this is before.
What am I? Antiseptics, right? Is that the word? Yeah, antiseptics and all that.
There was and the guy, was it John Lister over in England, was the first. Do they still have Listerine?
Listerine.
Anyway, is that a mouthwash? Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Anyway,
I'm learning so much right now.
It's like a
you should read the book. He
was disinfecting. He was the first one to, I think, disinfect the equipment, and he's trying to. It's like a new technology. Like, yeah, right. Those little microbes. We don't. We
don't believe in that.
We don't believe in that stuff.
Had they left the bullet in his body, he would have recovered. In a matter of days or weeks. And gone on to live a long, happy life with the bullet inside him. It was actually the doctor that killed him. I mean, there was an assassin. You know what I mean? So he got a bullet in the back. But yes, it was the attempt to save his life that actually killed him at the end of the day. So
it was.
So how long was he actually president? How long
it was months of him being incapacitated, right? I don't remember how long.
It was on his page.
It
looks like March 4th, 1881 to September 19th, 1881. So
there you go.
Like, I think he was shot a couple. Yeah, he was shot a couple months in, and then and then he lived for
couple months, whatever. It was a long. Yeah, it wasn't like that happened in days. I'm saying it was a long.
But they kept terrible, trying to get and
it was excruciatingly painful. Should we be doing our whole podcast on this? I'm sorry, but stream of consciousness. It's a fascinating story,
but the what I loved about him is he didn't really want that.
Yep.
And another one, I mean, George Washington is, I think I don't know if Napoleon was like, they talked to him about giving up power, and he made some comments, allegedly, history, but who do you think I am? George Washington?
Yep.
Yeah.
And in a very derogatory way.
Yep. Like, you think I'm just going to give up power like him? And so I'm fascinated with that the people in power that don't really want to be.
And speaking of John Adams was one of those guys trying to keep him, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying there were a lot of people around Washington that would have loved for him to stay.
To continue on.
Continue on. But he's like, no, I will step aside. I will let somebody take me off this post and put me back.
How does that look how do you guys see that applied to pastoral ministry?
The silence.
Well, I mean, if you have somebody in leadership that loves and fights for and tries to enhance plurality is a healthy dynamic. But if there's somebody in leadership that's always trying to reinforce I'm in charge and be a little bit of an island and exert authority, that's a dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm.
So how well do you function in plurality is a big thing?
I mean, functioning in plurality can have its chance. I think it's how well that you want it and celebrate it and seek it.
Do you think seeking authority, power is a bad thing? Because like in 1 Timothy 3, where it says whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a beautiful task. So there's some tension there.
Yeah,
right?
there's some tension. I don't think being in power is a bad thing.
Right.
Being corrupt in power is a bad thing. But when the righteous rule, the people are blessed. So
Well, and when you look through what elders are called to, even like 1 Corinthians 4, 1 and 2, but, 1 Peter, to give yourself as an example for others, to aspire to that, to aspire to servanthood, aspire to help guide and lead, but through servanthood, following the Jesus path. That's what, 1 Timothy 3, that's a noble quest, a noble calling. But it's those that seek power for the recognition of it. It's the very thing that the Pharisees, were, when Jesus really opened up on anybody, it was the Pharisees, because they wanted power for power's sake. To be on the post, to be seen by everybody else and that kind of thing. So that obviously there's a danger in wanting to be in pastoral leadership.
I'm curious what your guys' greatest fear is as a pastor. I think mine's connected to this, where I feel the fear of what success does to a person. That you start to, it's like that old SNL where it's like, welcome to Pathological Liars Anonymous. I'm so-and-so. I'm a member of this organization.
Actually, I'm the president.
In fact, he looks around. I'm the president of this organization. And you can have that where you begin to think, yeah, you know what? Stewards of the mysteries of God. In fact, I'm the president of this organization. And how do you, I think that is my fear, because how can you not read the Bible and see what did success do to David? What did it do to all these kings and people that it's so easy to get complacent, apathetic, start prosperity, what prosperity does, and getting nicer stuff and having, when you're not in need, and whether it's financially or you just lose your dependence. I think that would be my greatest fear.
Don't you think that typically that happens when you become detached from the very flock that you have been put in charge to manage? In other words, you've got to stay in touch with the average person, your neighbors, the people within your church, to realize, oh man, we hold way more in common than not. And I kind of want to get, dirty a little bit as I'm just in the trenches helping and serving alongside my fellow church members. It's when you get isolated and all of a sudden you got, we've heard about churches that have the private office with the private entrance, with the private bathroom, with the private jet, the private car, the private parking space. When you just keep insulating yourself more and more and more from people, just the people that you serve. Well, how can you serve from an ivory tower. You know what I mean? You can't. You can't tie.
It's always
I
a
think you're
mystery,
right.
like
I
the
think-
pastors that have a reserved parking spot. It was like, how late are you getting there? Like, you should have your pick of the parking lot
when you show. Well, this actually it's so interesting because a friend, old friend, was on staff at a church where it was a mega church, huge, one of the largest, fast growing churches in the States, and the pastor, thinking of how to share this to where nobody can locate this, I think so, is basically the pastor would kind of get there, not just late for the service, but right before he had to preach in the service,
man.
would pull up into a spot, would come in. This guy's on the radio. This guy's like a syndicated pastor and celebrity pastor. And I remember the way that he was talking about it, he was almost saying it as isn't that funny? Isn't that hilarious that he, not as a indictment against him,
Right.
but almost admiring him for the way he was able to just kind of be there last minute and was a dynamic preacher. But I mean, sure enough, I don't know, 5-6 years later is getting caught. He would spend the months, the winter months in Hawaii, and was kind of found out, was having affairs and scandalous pictures and stuff. But the point being, I think you're right, Jeff. I think you're so far up, your post is so tall, so high, that you lose touch with. It's a sea of admiring turtles below, and you're not among them.
You're untouchable, and
it's hard for those elders in that church because that person is the thing keeping this whole
the lightning rod,
thing going.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good insight.
It's a high price to pay.
You lose touch with people.
Yeah.
What's your fear, Jake?
Greatest fear in ministry, besides preaching with your fly down? This is getting vulnerable here. What's your greatest fear in ministry to the three of us and 1,400, James? 1,400 listeners?
I wouldn't go that
generous.
far.
Yeah. Those are total listens. Jake.
Total listens.
That's probably my family listening to it over and over.
Over and over.
So the 70 people.
You pay Savannah a little bit every week to just spike the numbers.
Find all the
devices.
devices. But yeah.
Sorry.
Fear in ministry. I think to be alone in leadership, of where people will talk about you but not talk to you, or not be in it all with you. Kind of a feeling of loneliness is probably the greatest fear.
Wow.
I don't. We need to get on the couch and
Yeah.
unpack that.
Yeah. No, that's legit.
Is that one of the reasons? I remember when we first got here to Iowa City, we had met once, I think, just hanging out, me, you, and another guy. And I think that's something that you were kind of looking for is, just pastors want to connect. And and then I think it was short after that, you went down to Arizona. Or I don't know what the timeline was on all that, but was that part of the move down to Phoenix? Connection?
Yeah. I mean, I love team sports, having teammates, people you're in it with. So yeah, had buddies down there joining ministry. And
Yeah. That's what's been so fun about, our proximity to Cedar Rapids is being able to stay connected. And
there's a safety in knowing that you have friends, whether it's a plurality of elders or brothers in Christ, that, they would say something. Like, I don't have to wonder if something's not right or wrong or the blind spots, where you just have a confidence like, they would tell me. And when you start to question that, like, would they tell me? Is there something wrong? Like, are they with me? Then it just creates this fear of loneliness. But to have a not just plurality, but a high confidence in your plurality where, if there's conflict, we'll work through it.
Yeah.
If there's blind spots, they'll point it out. Like, that's comforting.
Yeah, you're not insulated.
Yeah.
Do you think that pastoral ministry is one of the harder occupations or callings or whatever to leave behind? Or is every career could be hard, but I'm just thinking of...
What do you mean to leave behind?
Say retire, to retire from, or to...
Well, it's interesting. I wish I remember this.
Let go.
Statistics, like the number of pastors that make it past 6 years in ministry. And then if you go to 10 years, it drops even further. Like a lot of people that go into ministry don't finish their career in ministry. They end up doing something else. So
I think it would be. I mean, I think, isn't it? Some of it is that it's such a soulish commitment. You know what I mean? Like if it's no secret. I love trees. I've always, if I could just be a landscaper, plant tree or whatever, I would sincerely be very happy. There is something about ministry that it takes more of my soul. You know what I mean? Like I would be enjoying the presence of God, planting trees, trimming trees, whatever. But I'm just saying to go away from that, it would take a bigger part of my soul, I guess, or whatever. So whether that was, and also I think maybe it's my people pleasing side. I think what I always wonder, do people think I had to be let go because of some moral failure or whatever? You know what I mean? So the stakes are high. Like, what will people think? Whereas if you change vocations from this or that in just the workforce, nobody questions, was there a moral failure? They just think, he changed jobs or whatever. So I don't know, maybe some of that, the pressure, the societal pressure. Yeah. I had a weird thing happen though when you asked the big fear. Was it this last Sunday? I think it was. This young couple came up, hadn't met them, just meeting them for the first time. And she said, I just, you could tell she was going to have a poignant moment, She goes, I guess I just have to tell you now that we're talking, when I first started coming and you got up there and started speaking, I had a really hard time with you. And it's because you reminded me so much of my dad. And my dad was a pastor, but failed the church, failed our family, everything. And the way you talk and your age and everything reminded me of and you could just see, and she goes, but I'm so grateful. I kept coming and I kept listening and It wasn't her bringing an indictment. She was talking about the restorative aspect of what's happened in her life or whatever. But that just hit me like a ton of bricks because I thought I would have the opportunity to reinforce something really dark in her life. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, I want to live my life as before God and with integrity before God. But also, it's okay that we also realize if I go down, I'm taking other people with me. It is my family, but it's also the people of God in my church. Well, that's a good fear. That doesn't keep me living in hypocrisy or something, you know what I mean? Keep the mask on. No, it helps me to live in truth. And
is it the similar feeling of when Jesus talks about whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble, let a millstone be tied around his neck and thrown into the sea, and he says, such men will be punished most severely.
Totally.
The religious leaders, like you led people astray in my name.
Because how many vocations require that you, again, go back to 1 Peter 5, we're to live as examples for people. We are boldly saying, 1 Corinthians 13:1, follow me as I follow the example of Christ. Like, we're saying out loud, follow my example. You know what I mean? And so if we veer onto the wrong path, we're taking people down with us. And that is you asked me, what's my greatest fear? I mean, that moment she was trying to bring a word of encouragement to me. And I'm like, holy cow, it appropriately like raises the stakes for me and gives me healthy sense of fear, I guess. So if there's anything I fear the most, and especially my family, I mean, James is my son-in-law. When I think of my family, when I start getting emotional when I think about Audrey, my daughter Audrey, but then the circle just keeps going out, you know what I mean? And the number of people that would be disillusioned about Christ, disillusioned about God's church in general, if I went down that path, that's a fear, of course. Yeah.
Dude, some people fear misspeaking on the stage. Jake, did you hear about this?
Oh, my word.
What happened?
A couple weeks ago, I made an announcement that I was talking about a couple sharing a story, and I announced that they were pregnant, and they weren't pregnant.
Here's this picture of them and their two girls, and one on the way. And all of us that know him you could hear this buzz in the auditorium, like, are they really? Oh my word! No,
They just had a baby.
And we just thought he was like on the inside track. We're like, holy cow!
You know that moment where you look out and you see everyone like.
Did anybody correct you?
No, after the
we should have
service is
yelled it
over.
out. Yeah.
After the service is over, someone comes up and people are like, they're not pregnant. So the next two services, I had to make the unannouncement, like, hey, just so you know, I announced. So I was like, you guys tried doing this. This is a hard gig. Imagine.
That's right up there with the zipper down thing. By the way, Jake, your mortal fear, I lived that out. I went through an entire sermon with my zipper down. I get done, preaching, sit down. My phone goes off, and it's a friend that was in the front row, and he's going, hey, buddy, man check, your zipper's down. Like, no. Well, that would have been nice to know like 30 minutes ago.
We got to do some. Wait, okay, this is a great time for ministry bloopers. Do you got some good ones, Jake? We've got, I think one of the all times that goes down in my mind is the baptism.
Is this when you cannonballed into the tank? Or?
Oh, yeah, there was that one.
Well, there's that one.
Yeah, cannonball. There was one guy. This guy that came to know Christ. He was in youth ministry, and all the teachers. Nobody in the public school knew what to do with this guy. I mean, he had all the letters: ADD, ADHD. He's on. They're trying to. This guy was a piece of work, and he gave his life to Jesus, and everything changed. It was so cool. And I was in the tank, and I'm like, we got to do something special for this guy. So it was Alex Pruckler, and I was like, I whispered in his ear. So it's like, I was like, Alex, on the count of 3, just jump. I was like,
I
was like 1, 2, 3. He jumps, and I just slam him in the water. I mean, the splash just goes like probably a good chunk of the audience out by the baptistry in the old South Auditorium there at Cornerstone and Ames just got wet. It was hilarious. But that wasn't even it. The other one was this. Can you tell it, Jeff?
Are you talking about the one that not one of us did the baptizing, but So there was this dear woman who had given her life to Christ, and fast forward a little bit, she's going through chemotherapy treatment for cancer and everything else, and she's nervous to be up in front and giving her testimony, lights on and everything else, and she gets done with her testimony, turns on to be baptized, and the pastor gives his spiel, and then as he's putting her under, her wig falls off into the water. He brings her up, and she's now bald. Well, now he panics, he's freaking out. So he grabs this big wad of wig, slams it on her head, like really abruptly and harshly slams on her. Well, it's backwards, so it's in her, and she's trying to, cough and try to get this thing out of her head, and she's laughing,
and he's like moving it around to try to adjust
it.
It's like a wet mop. It's just like
the whole place is between laughing and in shock and fear or whatever. And she honestly, it was so cool. She totally lived into it and was not thrown off at all. She was happy in Christ. Or you can imagine everybody either calling him, how could you, or whatever, to laughing.
Jeff, you gotta tell the story of the homeless guy that you baptized.
Oh my
Jeff,
word! This guy.
And this ends with the most epic.
This guy, this dude, he's huge. He's huge. Gives his life to Christ, and he's got disabilities and stuff. So I'm working with him through his own faith experience, and he had come we were meeting outside in the city park. We used to do this on the 4th of July, and he had come wandering in, didn't have any shoes. Somebody took him aside, bought him some shoes. Anyway, this whole cool, beautiful gospel story. Anyway, gives his life to Christ. Now it's time for his baptism. We've worked through all this with him, Well, I'm now in the tank in front of everybody, telling the congregation, here's what's going on. He starts coming down, stops on the bottom step, looks at me, and just goes, I'm afraid of water. And I look up at him like, now you're finally telling me, this water has not been absent from our conversation about
he's
baptism.
Twice the size of Jeff.
He's just
it's like
huge.
Yeah,
he's just
like
huge. Oh yeah, easily twice. So he comes down in and is
it's like
so
watching
afraid.
Harry Potter. And who's the big dump?
Yes. Hagrid.
Hagrid. Yeah, it's like Hagrid walks in and there's a little Jeff.
That's exactly what it looks like. So me playing the role of Harry Potter. So he finally comes in, and he's trembling and he's shaking and he's standing, just so stiff. So I do the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I go to put him down. Well, he is like stiff as a board. He is so afraid that he will not buckle his knees or anything. So I kind of walk him back. Well, he's just so afraid. I'm literally like shoving him down, and then he's down there and won't do anything.
But he slips.
His feet come off the bottom of the thing, and now his feet are up, and I've got him so far down.
All you see from the crowd are these big 2 feet sticking up.
I got no choice. I just go down. I just dive down under all the water and just pull him up, and the whole I can hear as I'm coming out, everybody's like, everybody's just gasping. We
thought it was over.
Oh my word. Okay, but can I tell the rest
get him out? Yeah, tell the rest of the story.
Okay, this is actually, so yeah, oh my word, that was such a moment. But he ends up, not long after that, he has a daughter that lives out west, I think California or Nevada or somewhere. And he wants to go make things right with his now adult daughter that he has abandoned and become this homeless guy and or whatever else. So he jumps a train, kind of back to his old, here's how I got around, jumps a train. Well, a few weeks later, we kind of lost touch with him. The couple that had bought him that pair of shoes, a police officer comes to their door and says, hey, do you know so-and-so? And they're like, yeah, we do. Why? What happened? And they're like, well, here's what happened. He was on this train, died. He didn't he have a heart attack or something? Died on his way to go see his daughter. When they found him, the only identification they had on him was the New Testament that this young couple had given him and put written in this thing, if you ever need anything, call us, put their name, address, phone number, everything for him to know that they could always call on him. That was the only evidence of identity that he had on him. And so they came. But it's just such a beautiful, this guy came to Christ, was on his way to make things right. You know what I mean? And then God took him home. But I mean, I don't know, just such an epic story. And I bet they treasure to this day this auctioneers, right? Tyson, and Stephanie Auctioneer. So anyway, just a unbelievable, cool little gospel story woven in there. But but his baptism was memorable, man. Seriously, I went down, just both arms around this massive human being, lurching him up. Thankfully, water made him a little buoyant. Otherwise, I couldn't have done it. But
yeah, that was up. You got any bloopers?
Trying to think ones I can tell. On the podcast.
To turn the mics.
Keep your integrity.
We had a lady that would come and steal coats. People to hang their coats up in there, and she would steal coats. We caught her and followed her out. Some of the safety team followed her out in the parking lot and said, hey, you give the coats back and we want you to come to church, but you need to you need to check in when you come and let us know you're here. And but she was kind of taken back that like, we want you here. So she started to come to church regularly. But she took check in like at Info Central, or whatever, she just would always introduce herself to everybody. I'm the coat thief. Or like, you don't need to tell everybody that. Like, I'm the coat thief. Like that was just kind of how she would introduce herself to everybody.
You should do that with your water bottle, Mark.
You got to keep this story going, because then what happened?
Yeah,
right?
This was. They're kind of keeping an eye on her, and we also have problems with people shooting up in our bathrooms sometimes. Downtown church.
You guys have found needles.
Found needles in the garbage and stuff like that. And so she was in the bathroom for a long time, and one of the safety teams was kind of watching her. And one of our other elders was in the men's room, Garrett, I think, and he just hears, help me. And Garrett's looking around like, where's that coming from? Well, this lady comes out of the bathroom, and luckily one of our safety team guys was there, and she says,
the coat thief lady.
Yeah, the coat thief lady.
Yeah.
And said, hey, someone in the bathroom needs help. So he went in there, and this lady had flatlined.
Oh.
And he performed CPR. And he's like, I know. Like, he's U.S. Marshal. He's done this stuff. It's like, I broke her ribs. Like, I'm just trying to keep her alive. Get her to a hospital, revive her. She's survives. No broken ribs, no nothing. Just seemed like a miraculous thing. Was in church the next Sunday.
No.
Just excited to be there.
Saved
so we
her life.
think,
Wow.
yeah, we that 1 year we count the number of baptisms and resurrections. We pad the stats in our church. So
you got one in that column. We got zero.
Wow. Well, that's a little.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Props to the safety team.
Oh yeah, they're awesome.
I mean, literally saved someone's life,
Yeah.
and what a gift to have those people that are
Yeah.
at church and on point.
for
No
sure.
lie.
So, man,
Wow.
those are some stories. Coat thief
Seriously.
ends up. She kind of end up. I mean, she was. I don't know. Kind of saved someone's life a little bit.
Yeah, she was
in the right
she was
place. at the
involved in
right-
that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's
Wow.
good stories. Well, I don't know. We started this podcast, and I asked how your week's going, and now here we are. I think you're beginning with the funeral story. Kind of set us on a good trajectory. So that was an adventure. You got anything as we kind of wind down? Any thoughts to close or?
I didn't have
Typo on
thoughts
this?
I didn't have thoughts to open. Thoughts to close.
Yeah. Before I didn't. What do you guys think of this? This is a theory. Is one of the ways that I rarely come into a meeting with an agenda.
You don't say.
Imagine our shock.
The listeners are all shocked. They're turning around like, what?
You don't have
I'm
an
going to listen
agenda.
into this
Lean
part.
in.
You didn't have a
Tell me
script
more.
for this thing?
This is, hey, anyone can do this. So here's my question: is I feel like when I walk into the room, the people are the agenda, and so I think it's what I find fascinating is like if I'm dominating the like, well, this is what we're gonna do. It could feel like, well, I kind of want to know how this is like a team thing, what the agenda is also walking into the room. And so that's one of my things, like elder meeting. I always think it's obviously I'll come in with things we need to talk about.
Sure.
There's a few things, but I'm also interested staff meeting, elder meeting. And so I don't know. Do you think that's when you go into a meeting, are you pretty clear on at these are the three things we're going to hit? Like, do you usually like elder meeting type up notes, and are you?
We don't do
like
notes.
agenda?
We have an agenda.
Yeah.
I super admire that perspective of Where are the people in the room? Like they're kind of, I fight like, this is what we got to get accomplished. Yeah. We need to land this plane. We need to figure this out. I can be driven to the point of that where I'm not aware of the interruptions to the agenda that needs to happen.
I loved like when we had that year of overlap, the first year when you were going through the process of appointing elders for Cedar Rapids, I would come to your elder meetings that you would lead. And I love your leadership. So I'm not against agenda, but hey, to each his own. If you want to have an idea of what the meeting's about, that's great.
That's on you.
That's on you. So anyway, we just went on an adventure together.
We did.
And it was a good time. So any last thoughts before we close her down?
No, grateful for friends, man. Just grateful for friends.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite president?
I don't feel like I'm informed enough about all the presidents to know I do admire George Washington the most in what he did of turning down the power.
Yeah.
But if you're like,
is that the only?
You guys were talking about some book, and I'm just like, I didn't even know that.
Garfield, he was the president.
I didn't know he was a cat. He was a cartoon cat.
An orange cat.
Yeah. That's great.
He loves lasagna.
Yes, I love lasagna.
President Garfield loved lasagna. He hated Mondays, which is why President's Day is always on a Monday. Fact check, though. This is my fault. You said February 20th, President's Day. It's February 17th.
Oh, 17th. Okay.
Yeah. I put it wrong on the rundown.
Yeah.
Wow.
On purpose because I wanted airtime to be able to correct you on the podcast.
Everybody's got President's Day. I think if they would put some kind of food treat with President's Day, like we get Shamrock Shakes for St. Patrick's Day.
Cherry pie or something for Washington, something like that.
Let's put a food with it.
Put a food with it and
it's kind of on the people who planned it.
But I always remember the scene from Inside Out where they're down in his long-term memory and he's got the vacuum and he suctions out all the presidents and he leaves like the first three or something. He's like, oh, you're going to
leave George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and the fat one.
How many
Taft. We all remember Taft.
Taft.
Yeah, we remember him now that you said him, but I'm not.
Do you know who the president was after Garfield? Because I think he was also an overweight president.
Was it Harrison? No.
Chester Arthur.
Oh, yeah. Good call, man.
He was anyway.
No idea.
Did you know he was a president, Chester Arthur?
No.
Wait, is Harrison Garfield's first name? Is that why that works in my mind?
I think he's James Garfield.
No, you're right. Okay, all of a sudden I'm like, is there even a president? I started immediately. This is being recorded.
Yeah. You could have put any name in there. You know, Bill Thornton. Yeah. You bet.
William Henry Harrison. He is a president.
Thank you. And now if I would have just kept quiet, I would have been fine.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up. This is a very average pastor episode. We went on an adventure. Jake, you want to sign us off today? What you got?
Don't you feel like he should do?
I do. I feel
he
like
keeps assigning this to us.
Yeah.
I think you should.
I think sign us off?
Yeah.
What are you looking for in a sign off? Like stay classy, Iowa City.
What's our sign off today? Something about the turtle on the post, bringing it all the way back. Is it's
harder than you think, isn't it, Mark?
It is.
I like Three Turtles Afraid of Heights.
3 turtles.
Oh, dude, I do. I think so.
Yeah.
We're gonna rename. No, we can't.
Yeah.
He's in charge.
Well, whatever post God has put you on, just don't be amazing. Just be faithful.
There you go.
And until next week. See you guys.
See ya.
Good chat.